Alright, so in the last video I kind of got cut off. I was talking about the Jezebel bitch of the club that taught me a lot about female nature. At the first meeting I had with her alone, I didn't want to meet with her alone, so I brought my mom to the meeting just to let these bitches know I don't trust them. But at that point she made a kind of, I guess it was an impersonal comment, because she was talking about some Indian that she knew who was just a crazy bitch. So I don't know, I guess she was saying that she got intimidated by me bringing my mom, who could be a crazy bitch, to the meeting. But later on, when I guess after a couple of years in the club, uh, she did a lot of disgusting stuff actually when she wasn't an officer anymore, just showing her true, personality. But the comment she made about Indian people doing dirty shit, I think that was when she was just like, she realized that I wasn't gonna be a sucker for her, so she didn't care at that point. She just wanted to talk shit freely, like I guess she'd always been holding back on. So anyway, the bitches ain't shit. Trust none coming out of their mouth, especially if they're not open and honest about their background. But where were we? We're at the start of the page, and how they know which opinions to attack and which not to attack, and how to undermine gradually. The Fabian method, the Fabian socialist method. Undermine them gradually and weaken them by cloaking them in ambiguity, and by cloaking themselves too with their sinister intents. So the third important conclusion, the second conclusion was that they can alter the opinions by diverting them from their accepted course, by changing them, or by placing them in an ambiguous context. They're talking about public opinion, and they're also talking about how there is not any continuity between opinion or fixed patterns and action. And this is all because he wants to disprove certain things. He wants to say that changing mass opinion on a precise and well-established point, that it can be done, and so forth. So the third important conclusion, drawn from experiments made chiefly in the United States, is that propaganda cannot create something out of nothing. It must attach itself to a feeling, an idea. It must build on a foundation already present in the individual. The conditioned reflex can be established only on an innate reflex or a prior conditioned reflex. The myth does not expand helter-skelter. It must respond to a group of spontaneous beliefs. Action cannot be obtained unless it responds to a group of already established tendencies or attitudes stemming from the schools, the environment, the regime, the churches, and so on. Propaganda is confined to utilizing existing material. It does not create it. And the existing material falls in four categories. First, there are the psychological mechanisms permitting the propagandist to know more or less precisely that the individual respond in a certain way to a certain stimulus. Here the psychologists are far from agreement. Behaviorism, depth psychology, and the psychology of instincts postulate very different psychic mechanisms and see essentially different connections and motivations. Now I just want to add that at the bottom level they probably don't know what to do that precisely with these psychic differences, but at the higher levels, when they really have to target somebody important, I'm sure they know which one to use and how, because all the knowledge is not there present at the average psychologist's level or in their training. So Psychology of instincts, yeah, so the different mechanisms and different connections and motivations. So here the propagandist is at the mercy of these interpretations. And second category is that opinions, conventional patterns, and stereotypes exist concretely in a particular milieu or individual. And this is the utilizing material for propaganda on the to obtain the auction. And then third is the ideologies, which are more or less consciously shared, accepted, and disseminated, and which form the only intellectual or para-intellectual element that must be reckoned with in propaganda, because all the intellectual knowledge we have received from society, basically. So that's ideologies, groups. Whereas the second one is opinions, more individual, conventional patterns and stereotypes. And then there's the psychological mechanisms, and lastly, the propagandist must concern himself above all with the needs of those he wishes to reach. So they manipulate our basic needs, as you know, with Pavlov's experiments and Maslow's hierarchy. Let's go down and see what they say. At the most elementary level, propaganda will play on the need for physical survival in time of war. This can be further utilized either to weaken resistance or to stifle it. By fighting, you have a chance for survival. That's what Goebbels used to say. To play on the need for physical survival. Alright, so the needs of the individual is also important, or the group. All propaganda must respond to a need, whether it be a concrete need, bread, peace, security, work, or a psychological need. Propaganda must also consider the image that the propagandee has of the ways in which his needs can be satisfied. So they should also know how to target him through the different steps he's going to take, and also aims at modifying this image of what people expect. Okay. So we shall discuss this last point, or the psychological needs, later on. Propaganda cannot be gratuitous. So the same way the free fails are not, they don't make it easy to get access. So the propagandist cannot simply decide to make a propaganda. Oh, okay. So it's not propaganda. It's actually propaganda, not about the needs. So propaganda cannot be gratuitous, which means very generous, I think. Gratuitous, freely giving, yeah. It's not just whenever you ask, you get an answer. No, it's like it's perfectly managed. Everything is planned out, and all the questions have already been played out in the mind, you know? So the propaganda can be perfected. The propagandist cannot simply decide to make propaganda in such and such a direction on this or that group. The group must need something, and the propaganda must respond to that need. So one weakness of tests made in the United States is that far too often the experimental propaganda used did not correspond to a single need of the persons tested. And a frequent error on the part of the propagandist pushing something is a failure to take into account whether or not the propagandee needs it. Right. Of course, when we say that the propagandist has to use existing elements, we do not mean that he must use them in direct or... Okay, let me continue this in the next video.